And so you've visited and seen things from very early on since Assad's fall. Again, a similar question to you, but obviously from Norway's perspective and the wider European region, which traditionally has looked at Syria with different priorities. So from your perspective, what steps has Norway taken over the past 12 months to engage and to support Syria's transition? And as you look to year 2, with all of the challenges that Syria faces, as they pertain to Norway and to wider Europe, what's your assessment, Tane?
Thank you, Charles. So I also vividly remember the Saturday of Doha Forum a year ago, where in the morning panels we were discussing whether ever Assad would go, and in the afternoon panel he had left. So, it was very much being present at a very historic moment. And I was looking back at the statement I made and many of my colleagues made, and found out that they were quite good. We said, this opens up an opportunity. It will not be easy. The new forces, the new government needs our support. We need to give this a chance. We shall not be naive, but we need a process that is Syrian-owned and Syrian-led, and we want an inclusive Syria. And I also argue that if we do not give this opportunity a chance, we will probably be right. I mean, if we assume it will fail, we will help it to fail. If we, however, we assume that it can succeed, we might contribute to the Syrian success, but the success has to be a Syrian success. And I must say, recognizing the long list of challenges that the government still faces, and let's not be naive, I think on balance, this year has been well spent. And I have to say, being a frequent critique of the international community, this time we got it right. There was a broad agreement from an surprisingly early stage that we should not leave the new government with inherited sanctions for the failures of a previous government. Well, let them at least do their own failures before we sanction them. And that argument, I went, as you said, early January, when an early visitor came out very strongly, arguing with our American friends, our European friends, we need to do something on these sanctions, and that largely worked. And I think that encouragement was so important, and my early meetings with President al-Shara was very much focused on practical aspects of economy, the need for early recovery, to reap this peace dividend while people still had trust. And I'm proud that we were able to establish links on energy, on health, on the transitional justice, on other key issues, but also increasingly working with the government. And we were early in working with the government directly, and in hindsight, I think we got it right this time.
Yes, absolutely. And Ambassador Barrack, just tying on to exactly what Minister Ida was just saying, on the question of engagement and sanctions and all of the developments we've seen take place over the last 6 months or so in particular, it's not a secret that there were components of the Trump administration that were probably skeptical of Syria when President Trump first came into the office. But of course in May, to the president's huge credit, he took the step to meet with President al-Shara in Saudi Arabia and fundamentally changed the game. So my question to you really is just, what drove that decision? And the extraordinarily bold, I think, step that the US government has taken since, which has broken every record in terms of sanctions relief and diplomatic engagement in post-conflict environments.
Number one, thanks, Charles, for heading this super important panel. But I think, and you heard from Don Jr., who I'm so proud of for everything that he and his family has accomplished through great political battles. But with credit to my boss, President Trump, which is not political, right? The vagaries of the West are not attributed to one political party or another. But since 1916, the West has not done a very good job at guiding or providing architecture to this region. Since Sykes-Picot, almost every decision that the West has imposed on the region, rather than letting the region evolve itself, has been a mistake, and we're living with the aftermath of that. So, although President Trump may be unpredictable in some senses, he's really not. He's studied. And he saw the vagaries of the past, of what had happened with our interference in coups and regime change from World War II, we invented everything, right? We invented NATO. We invented the United Nations. We invented UNESCO. We invented the CIA. We invested the Marshall Plan. We invested Bretton Woods. And if you were to evaluate all of them and their efficacy on this region, you'd probably give them a very low mark. President Trump had studied the situation, and quite honestly, when he got off the plane in Riyadh, Saudi Arabia, and the Crown Prince had invited the foreign minister's boss, President El-Shara, he made a determination on the ground based on lots of study that this region is about athletes. It's not about federalism. It's not about democracy. It's not about centralization. It's about leadership. He decided, and spending some time with President El-Shara, that to give them a chance, to give this leader the opportunity to create their own architecture and allow it to happen without interference. So what we did, the contribution this time for America was very different than it's ever been. We said, we're not going to labor you with hopes and expectations of a democratic structure that has never been feasible in the past. We're going to allow you to decide your own structure. Miraculously, in that 10 months, the foreign minister, who I spend a lot of time with, I applied to be his barista, but I can't keep up with him. He's a rocket ship. They all are. And I have to tell you, I think from President Trump and Secretary Rubio's point of view, which we do, in relieving them of sanctions, we go through a report card. If you remember, Secretary Rubio in March had sat down with Foreign Minister Shabani and given him a section of 8 expectations of things that you all want. Integration of all the communities, the continuing investigation into missing persons, the care and taking of camps, the dismantling of foreign fighters, the chemical weapons, which has always been an issue. And honestly, on those issues, for a very small team, in my humble personal opinion, I give them an A in all of those categories in which they had very limited resources. So I think President Trump's instincts, along with a very understandable team headed by Secretary Rubio in evaluating lessons of the past, was all about let's pick the athletes, not necessarily the stadium. And in our estimation, it's heroic and epic what they've done in what will be 2 years and a couple of days. And what we all have to do is help them, entitle them, encourage them, and allow them to form the kind of government and inclusive regime that they, the Syrians, would like to do. But we're very proud of them.
Thank you very much. Minister Shaybani, back to you. When you entered Damascus, one of the things President Shara publicly announced very early on was the importance of Syria having a foreign policy that sought problems with nobody. In other words, a balanced foreign policy. You seek to engage with everyone, whether you have differences or similarities. And I think over the past year, I'm not an expert on Asia or other regions of the world, but I can't think of many countries around the world that have managed to sustain, especially in a complex post-conflict environment, a balanced relationship